Welcome everyone to this Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program 1.1.3, also known as Turbocharged. Now, in the previous episode, episode 50, we built this rather natty aeroplane, which we took on a journey over to the emergency runway. Now, that wasn't entirely successful, but it did prove this vehicle is capable of atmospheric flight, but this is not what it's intended for. This is actually supposed to be a plane on a stick, so we need to build the stick. But the purpose for the vehicle as a whole will remain a mystery until a little bit later. So let's get cracking. Right, so it's time to start building our stick. So let's just open the space plane hangar vehicle. So there's our plane Mark 1. So there we are, loaded down here at the bottom of the VAB. Now I'm not actually sure which piece of this craft is the root part. So what I'm going to do is just going to reroute it. So select the reroute tool, pick the craft anywhere, doesn't matter. And I think I'll pick the circular air intake as the new route, just somewhere to grab it. So let's just bring it right up here to the top of the VAB. Next, well, I've just noticed a couple of things. Firstly, we need to not start extended. We need to have these starting retracted because we're going to have this as a rocket. I've also noticed we're missing a little thing in here. We're missing from the science section the Kerbal engineering system. This will be quite handy for our future travels. And I've also noticed we're missing a few snacks. So I thought we'd better give these guys a few snacks for their journey. So let's go and search for life support. So let's just get a couple of these life support mini packs. I'm just going to squeeze them in here just below the cockpit. So let's just squeeze that in there. I think that should be okay. What I think I might do is just clip them in slightly. So it's just the move tool and toggle the snap so we can just gently slide them into the body. There we go, like so. And that should be just fine. Give our pilot and co-pilot something to snack on. They'll just have to, yes, we won't worry about the waste. We'll just give them somewhere to snack. So that's the snacking sorted out. So I think next we need to think a bit more about our stick. Now, one of the questions that was raised earlier in the previous episode, or in response to the previous episode, was why I had chosen the LVT-30 Reliant liquid fuel engine when there were other choices. Now, my reasons were simply that I needed something long, pointy and powerful. But there were other good choices. The Smiling Blobfish, in this case, pointed out that the LVT 45 engine, which is also long and pointy, also has gimbaling or swiveling, as is in its name, which will give us a lot more control. Or we could have used the LV909 Terrier, which is a lot less powerful, a lot less pointy, but a heck of a lot more efficient. Now, whether my choice is going to be correct, it will just have to be seen. So let's get on with building the stick for our plane on the stick. So I'm going to need an adapter. So let's get the Rocamax brand adapter, because this stick is going to consist of the good old Rocamax Jumbo 64 fuel tank, and we're going to have a couple of those. So we'll have plenty of fuel, and we then need an engine. We need to stick something underneath it. We could go for the mainsail. So let's have a look at the mainsail and just check what we've got over here in terms of thrust to weight ratio. We've got 1.77, and I tend to go for about 1.6 being a pretty decent thrust to weight ratio off the pad. So that's pretty good, but we're not finished quite yet. And the reason we're not particularly finished quite yet is because of this. Now here is our centre of mass, and up here, way up here, is our centre of lift, or centre of drag, depending on how you're looking at it. And in this case, it's way, way, way ahead of the centre of mass. So it's going to mean our vehicle is going to try and flip round. So we've got to sort that out. So what I thought we'd do is we could either use our AVR8 winglet, or perhaps use something a little bit larger. So let's go for the maximum number of, there we go, the maximum number of fins. And that's actually brought our centre of lift much further back, which for a rocket is a lot better. So I think we'll go for the maximum of 8 of those fins. We've still got 1.76, so that didn't really add much to our weight, and hence reduce our thrust to weight ratio. So that's looking pretty good. The only other thing I'm thinking of now is how we're going to squeeze in, we've got to squeeze in some of our launch stability enhancers, and that could prove a little bit tricky. And the reason why is I don't want them to clip through these fins. So how can we do this? What we could do is we could either have 6 of these, because 6 symmetry seems to fit a lot better for putting on stability enhancers. But you see, that's still got quite a high centre of lift. So another option is to go for much larger fins. So let's have a look. What else have we got? We've got some delta wings here somewhere. We've got these tail fins. We've got these canards. What else have we got? Yeah, like I said, we've got some small delta wings. Oh, here we go. We've got these Delta Deluxe winglets. I wonder if we can get even 6 of those. Really isn't going to bring down our centre of lift that much. Because what I was trying to do is to see if we can get those nicely fitted inside. You see there's a nice symmetry there for fitting those fins. So there is another option. We can go for, I much prefer these RV8 winglets, and get 8 of these and have them slightly higher than I was intending, and then get these launch clamps, 8 of those, just beneath. Can I squeeze them in just beneath? Not sure that really is fitting. We may have to test that, because what I don't want to do is to find that these parts are clipped together, and so when the clamps drop, it'll result in a bit of an explosion. So we will have to simulate that. So we'll worry about that a little bit later. Let's just bring this down in the VAB now that we know where the base of our vehicle is. So that's okay-ish. Okay-ish. Right. Next, what I want to do, we're going to have a little bit of control, a little bit of parachute, and a little bit of detachability. So which of those should we do first? I think we're going to go for our tiny little Separatron engines first. So when this stage stages, if we just come down to 4 of our little Separatrons here, I want the this rear stage here just to back away. Now, I have rather got these on the wrong way round, but that's for a reason. And I've seen Ruben over at Kerbal Space Command do this, and I quite like doing this. If we grab hold of our Separatrons, we can actually embed them into our craft. Now, this is, strictly speaking, clipping, which we don't always like. Let's have a look. Let's turn them around and see if we can get those legs. So that's about vertical. If we go to snap, it should snap vertical. There we go. So what we can do now is just embed these in a little bit further. I think it's, oh, there we go, we're on place mode, aren't we? I needed to go on to move mode, so let's just go back in on fine control mode. So let's just embed these right in. There we go. So that's, if I just clip away, see they're just slightly protruding. So let's go and get the rotate tool and just with fine control just rotate them round. There we go. So they're now just looking like little vents, which you might imagine would be nice and neatly embedded on exactly this sort of vehicle. So that's good. So that's going to give us some thrust away from our main stage. So that's got that sorted out. Next, I think we'll go for some control, because this is going to be quite a weighty vehicle. So this is going to be pretty difficult to maneuver. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the control section and get some of these Werner engines, which will give us quite a lot of control. They use liquid fuel and oxidizer instead of monopropellant, but they will be a lot more powerful. So let's get 4 of those in there, and then I can't quite clip any in down there, so I'll put these just above. Now we're not docking, so I don't need forward and back. I just need some control over our vehicle as a whole. Okay. So that's giving us our steering control when we're out of the atmosphere. These AVR8 winglets will give us our in-atmosphere control, so that's all good. Next, I think we will go for our parachutes. Now, the chutes themselves are going to be for chute recovery to recover our orange tanks here. And I'm going to go for 8, probably overkill, but I do want to recover this stage, and let's just make sure we set the minimum pressure up here to was it 0.4? 0.4. That should give us enough time for the parachutes to open and then to recover our stage. And because the parachutes were put on in symmetry, they've all been set the same. Okay, so we have our parachutes set, we have our control, we have our fins, and we have our, there we go, our Werner engines. Finally, we need to do a few bits and pieces. One of those bits and pieces is to sort out the staging, because we've got all the parachutes and engines and all kinds of things here in the wrong stages. Let's get those separatrons up into this stage. We hover over this stack decoupler, so when that decouples, that engine will fire and all of these engines will fire, and it'll also arm those 8 parachutes that we have. Down here in the bottom stage, we don't want the jet engines going. The jet engines are for here we go, are for our landing. So let's get those up into this stage here. And the parachutes here at the top are our emergency landing, because as you saw in the previous episode, emergency landings are more my thing. And then down here at the bottom we have the clamps and the main engine. Now, with all of that extra weight added with the parachutes and the fins and what have you, we are down a little bit low. So I'm a little bit concerned that we are a little bit low on the thrust to weight ratio. So after our simulation, we will double check whether it's necessary to do this. Obviously, if the simulation goes to plan, it'll just go to plan. Right, now inventory. What are we going to put in the inventory of these 2 cockpits? We've got nothing in that one at the moment. What have we got in this one? Let's have a look at this one. We've got nothing in either of these 2 cockpits, but we are going to need a few bits and pieces, and that will all become clear later. But for now, let's go and get some of those bits and pieces. Now, we're going to need some of these port connectors. I'm going to get 4 just because. So let's grab that. And I also thought we might find... let's move these out of the way for the moment, rather getting in the way of the selection screen here. I wonder if we can get explosive. We've got an explosive? No, we've got separatrons and launch systems. I'm looking for the TNT. We'll have to find that. I don't know that it's actually under TNT. Where we go? Let's see, stopack container. So we're going to have to find that. Oh, maybe it's under, no, not colonisation or freight. EVA items maybe? There we go. K4 standard explosives. We're going to take 2 of those. And we're also going to take a wrench. And we will also take an electric screwdriver. And again, it will all become clear when the time comes. So that's the inventory that we're going to take. So I think we are just about right to do our simulation launch. So let's change this to plane on a stick Mark 1. If only we could capitalize our stick quite correctly. Make sure I've got the right number. It doesn't really matter about spaces. There we go. Plane on a stick Mark 1. Let's save this and let's get it on a test flight. Well, Jeb is in the pilot seat here for this simulation. So let's get our KOS console out and run our launch script. This is our standard launch script, so keep an eye down at the center of the launch pad to see if those launch claps do indeed detach correctly. So 3, 2, 1 and go. Excellent, those launch clamps did separate correctly, so good bit of construction there by the guys in the VAB. So if we look over here now at our actual thrust to weight ratio, you see it's rising pretty quickly as we burn off the liquid fuel in that lower stage. So that's okay. We're now already up to well, almost 1.7. So that's excellent. We do have some good stability from those AVR8 winglets, and the problem of our centre of lift or centre of drag being in the wrong place for our vehicle doesn't seem to be a problem quite yet. So the simulation is going very well. So let's just see if we can get this vehicle up to orbital altitude and actually complete the circularization phase for this plane, and then complete the simulation by trying a simulated landing. Yes, well, hopefully it'll go a little bit better than the one we did over at the emergency runway. Well, that wasn't too bad. We got down parallel with the runway. We were just going a little bit too fast and missed the end, so we had to deploy the emergency parachutes. But we were down in one piece, so any landing you can walk away from is obviously a success. And of course, we did actually land on the wheels, so it has to be considered a double success. So that was a pretty good job. Now we are coming up to, what is that, apoapsis height of about 50 kilometers now. So we're looking for our standard apoapsis of about 100. And looking down at the bottom right here, we can see our liquid fuel is running out. You can just see here we're getting about, what is that, 10% left. We're now on full throttle as we cruise up to our apoapsis height of 100 kilometers. We're at 90 right now. So there we go, main engine cut off. Let's put on our RCS. There we go, put on our RCS and just use those Werner engines just to help with control, just getting us around to our blue target marker there. There we go. So we are on, there we go, planted on the marker there. Now it's an estimated burn of 29 seconds, 1,000, there we go, 1,065 delta V. But in this stage we have There we go, 792. So we're going to be, well, about 300, give or take 350 short. So we're going to have a slightly eccentric orbit, but that's not going to be a problem. I don't think that's going to turn out to be a problem. We have quite a lot of delta V left over already. We've got 2,300 delta V in the craft total. So let's see how this goes. So we've got locking in alignment at 1 minute 15, which is around about now. So there we go, locking in that node. So we're all locked in now. So let's just time accelerate forward to about 20 seconds. So times 5, 50 seconds to go, 40 seconds, 30 seconds. Let's just bring it out of time warp. So we've got 30 seconds. So we've still got about 15 seconds before the burn starts. And this is really the test that the smiling blobfish was really talking about, because we're in orbit now. So the extra power of the Reliant engine is probably not that useful, but the extra efficiency of the LV909 Terrier engine might well prove a bonus. But we'll see when the surprise comes, and that's not going to be for a little bit yet. So let's just complete this circularization. So we're just burning through the last of our orange tanks worth of fuel, and there we go, off goes our section there, and we're burning now on this Reliant engine. You see it there at the back, burning away quite nicely. Still got about 100 delta V to go before we are, there we go, so we are now in orbit, and we should be in, there we go. So we are now in an orbit. It's an orbit of 107 by 93, so a bit eccentric, primarily because our craft had two quite asymmetric, quite different thrusts from the main cell, and then this Reliant engine for the last part. So there we are. Jeb's done a very nice upside down launch. Let's turn him round so he's at least parallel with the surface there, and then get out, here we go, get out our panels. So he's going to be snacking there whilst the simulation proceeds. So what I'm going to do is we're going to wait until we have gone around the dark side of Kerbin here and are preparing for our return back down to the surface so we can simulate our landing. So we'll catch up with Jeb in a few minutes. Well, we didn't really pick a particularly good time for our landing because KSC is going to be in the dark when we arrive. But we are where we are, so let us get ourselves a maneuver node. Let's put a maneuver node in here and just set ourselves up a simple maneuver that's going to bring us down roughly around those mountains. Then we'll fly over the mountains in order to get back to KSC. So that's the maneuver we're going to put in. It's about 151 meters per second. That's not particularly important. What's really important is that we can see where our predicted landing site was going to be. So let's just maneuver ourselves around to our maneuver node. There we go. So we're on our maneuver node. It's a 4 minutes and 24 seconds time. So let's just use we use time warp to bring us round to about 20 seconds before, because we do have our very powerful Reliant engine. That's why we've got our powerful Reliant engine, so we can make these maneuvers pretty sharpish. So we're pretty much on the maneuver now. So let's just burn that maneuver. So we're looking to get our blue line onto the maneuver's orange dotted line, and there we go. So we've got 5 meters per second left. We'll just close that now. So our predicted location of landing is just in front of the mountains just here. So what we're going to do now, I think, is just prepare Jeb for the landing. So we're going backwards right now. So let's turn ourselves forward. So that's the direction of travel. Let us bring our panels back in. There we go. So let's bring those back in. These are the retractable type. Get them back into their casing, see if we can protect them from fiery doom or the slopes of doom and fiery death that we've experienced in the past, and just see whether we can get Jeb back to the runway. So we'll catch up with Jeb again when he reaches the atmosphere, because we're still 105 kilometers up, so that's still a pretty decent way to go before we start getting any atmospheric effects and anything we need to worry about. Let's not tell Jeb what we need to worry about. So I'll see you in a minute. Well, we're at 76 kilometers now, so we're just above the atmosphere. So we've got a few little bits of preparation left to do. So first things first, we can shut down that engine, because we won't be using the Reliant engine again. Let's just double check the intake is open, so it says close the intake by pressing the button. So the intake is open. These engines are not currently active. We will activate those when we get into the thicker part of the atmosphere. So we are now in the top part of the atmosphere at 68 kilometers, so we've still got a fair way to go before we see our fiery doom ahead of us. Jeb is happy enough for the time being. We've got quite a surface area there presented to our direction of travel, so let's just see how many of our parts actually survive this part of the re-entry, because of course we've only done atmospheric tests so far. This is our first space-based test, so we've got to see whether the parts can stand the heat. So we're down to 57 kilometers now, just entering this thicker part of the atmosphere here at the top, which I think is about 54 kilometers. So we're just about to break that level now. So far so good. Orbital speed 2,252 meters per second, starting to get those heating effects, so keep an eye out for overheating parts. We've already got one, which is this basic fin down here, so that's not a good start. Still sort of in the orange to amber stage. When it gets red, I think we're going to be in real trouble for that part. Yes. Just as I said it, it's gone. So that's the end of the fin at the bottom. Although, to be honest, a fin at the base might have made landing a little more tricky. So to be perfectly honest, that's a bit of rocket surgery that probably helped us. So cross fingers, that's the only bit of rocket surgery that is going to be part of this simulation that we are doing. So Jeb, our 2-star pilot, concentrating there on the controls. We got down to, where we go, surface speed now of 1,800 meters per second, 1.8 kilometers per second. That's dropping pretty sharpish. You want to get down to about 1,000 meters per second before you know you're really going to be safe from these atmospheric effects. So we're down to 1,500 meters per second. No more red marks, no more thermometers, no more overheat indicators, which is always a good sign. 22 kilometers up, about to come into the middle section of the atmosphere now, and there we go. We are losing our atmospheric effects, and that's all good news, but we don't really want to be spending our time coming down belly first, at least not quite as dramatically. So let's get ourselves, whoops, the right way up. There we go, the right way up. A little bit of a celebration there, I think, from Jeb. a little bit too much of a celebration. So let's just get our engines, activate those now. There we go. Let's get them spooling up. At surface speed of about 250 meters per second, which is a pretty fair speed, to be honest. That's a pretty successful speed. You can see our prograde marker here just beginning to rise up, which is actually a good sign. It means our engines are and our glide is doing quite well. So let's start getting a little bit of thrust, build up a little bit of speed, and see if we can get some level flight out of the vehicle that remains. We've still got quite a way to go. We've still got to get ourselves over this mountain range, but we seem to have held our surface velocity. Let's see if we can't get control over our descent, which is still coming down pretty sharpish. We're falling at, here we go, 30 meters per second. We can see that is rising in terms of vertical speed. So it's now only 25 meters per second. So we are actually beginning to get a grasp of our vertical speed as well as horizontal surface speed, which is now leveled out at 190 meters per second. We're still falling, so let's give ourselves a little bit more thrust. You can see here our vertical speed is climbing, which is a good thing. You can see that our prograde marker again is rising. That means we are again beginning to get more positive vertical speed. Looks like the lift we have from these relatively small surfaces is just about doing its job. Let's nose up just a little bit more. And there we go, we have positive vertical speed. So let's see if we can maintain, there we go, about 8 kilometers. Try and keep ourselves relatively flat. Now it's going to be a while before we arrive back at the KSC. We may just about get there before sundown, which is good news. So I think we're going to leave Jeb to cruise his way back, and we will rejoin him when we begin our final approach. So we're on our final approach. You can see KSC here. You can just about make out the runway. Now it's going to be pretty dark, and that's going to make our landing extremely difficult. But no more difficult than the fact that this plane has been extraordinarily difficult to fly. And I think it's because I've got far more fuel on board than I ever expected to have at this stage. So I've moved as much of the fuel out of these two tanks to the emergency tank, which was empty of oxidizer. So I've moved 55 litres of oxidizer forward to try and move the centre of mass as far forward as we can. So I'm just trying to adjust our approach now. We're a good few kilometres out. We're about 2 kilometres up, and we're a little bit north of the runway, which you can just see here. I'm also going to prepare to have our parachutes ready, because I think we are going to need them. Jeb is very confident, but he's more confident than I am. So let's get the gear down, 1,500 meters up. Let's get our speed down as low as possible. Get ourselves over to the south side of the runway. You can just see this bright building here is the space plane hangar, so that's really our guide. That's about halfway down the runway. So let's just start turning ourselves around. We're a kilometre up. 160 odd meters per second is pretty speedy, really. We're coming down at 27 meters per second. That's pretty hard. So let's just keep drifting ourselves in line with the runway. If we don't make it, doesn't matter, we do have our parachutes. It's pretty dark, it's very difficult to see the runway. I think it's light enough for there to be no runway lights, but too dark for us to see where we're going. We're a little bit still to the north of the runway. Still 280 odd meters up. I think we're going to miss the runway. So I think it's going to be time to abort. So parachutes out, engines off. And then nose down. So I'm sorry, Jeb, we didn't get to do a decent landing this time either. Brakes on. And at least, well, at least we might be able to taxi. We might be able to taxi up to the space plane hangar. I don't think that really counts as a landing. No, not really. But Jeb can claim that at least he got onto the runway eventually. So he's just going to park up, hope nobody noticed, and call it a day. The simulation went relatively well. We've got the plane back. We've got it back to the space plane hangar. We proved that we could get our plane on a stick into orbit, so that was pretty good. So there we go. We only lost one part, which was the fin on the base of the engines. So that was the basic fin on the base, but that actually was pretty good. That actually worked pretty well. It actually worked probably in our favour. Yeah. Well, we're down, so well done, Jeb. Another landing you've managed to walk away from. So with that said, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Well, I thought it might be a good idea to do a bit of an epilogue, a bit of a dissection about why this plane was so difficult to land, apart from the fact the pilot wasn't any good. Now, when we went over to the island runway, we had actually removed quite a lot of fuel, but that wasn't the case when we were coming into land. It was a bit more like this. We had quite a lot of fuel left in these tanks. I think this tank was more or less full, but we had filled up this tank with oxidizer. So let's have a quick look at the centre of mass and centre of lift. Now they are pretty much in the right order, in the right place, but they are quite close together. We don't have very much lift. And we only had one tail fin, so let's change that. So, I mean, it should have been, yes, it should have been landable, but it was very, very difficult to manoeuvre. During the flight back to the KSC, even the slightest change of direction was causing it to spin violently out of control. So there was a lot of simulations going on, so Jeb, Bill and Bob had a lot to think about before finally bringing the plane in for its simulated emergency landing. So with that said, again, I would thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. bye.